That sunny and dusty morning, four truckers parked their steel giants in front of a simple roadside diner. They came only for coffee and a quick rest, but their presence there would shake that place forgotten by time. Between yellowed walls and scratched tables, there was a young waitress who carried on her shoulders the weight of silence and cruel humiliations. What seemed like just another ordinary day would soon turn into a clash of stares, words, and truths. Would the rough hardness of those men of the road bring even more fear to that space? Or would the frankness and courage the asphalt had taught them be enough to see an injustice and, unlike everyone else, refuse to remain silent before it? The doorbell jingled, muffled by the sound of heavy boots. Four truckers walked into the roadside diner, bringing with them the smell of diesel and the morning dust. Outside, the engines were still cooling, chrome reflecting the sunlight on the gravel. Jack Reynolds led the way. He was the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to be respected. His face was marked by years on the road, his gaze steady and calm, yet carrying an intensity that unsettled. Behind him were his companions. Cole, the youngest, always restless, Frankie, a man of few words and watchful eyes, and Sam, a veteran with a graying beard and heavy posture, carrying memories too big for words. The diner looked tired. Scratched formica tables, worn-out stools, the smell of fried food mixed with stale coffee. The neon sign flickered as if just as exhausted as the waitress approaching with timid steps. Grace Miller. The name tag said the name, but it wasn't needed. Her expression spoke louder, a polite yet broken smile, like someone apologizing for existing. "Table for four?" she asked, almost in a whisper. Jack nodded. "In the corner, if you've got one." They sat down, and Grace, the waitress, brought the mugs. She tried to keep her composure, but her hands trembled slightly. Before she could finish serving, a voice cut across the room. "Grace, can't you hear? Move it, girl." It was Earl, the owner of the diner, stepping out of the kitchen with a towel on his shoulder and a sour expression. Grace shrank back, muttering a "Yes, sir." Jack observed. That wasn't just a routine scolding, it was the kind of voice that came from habit, from someone used to humiliating. Grace returned with plates, balancing them with effort. That was when Shirley, Earl's wife, joined the scene. Her face heavy with makeup, cold eyes, and a poisonous smile. "Look at her, Earl, how she's holding those plates. Looks like she's going to drop everything again." She spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. Then she turned to a customer at the next table and added, "That girl isn't even fit to carry a tray." Some chuckled awkwardly. Grace lowered her eyes and kept serving. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she didn't answer. Cole, across the table, clenched his fists. "What disgusting people!" he muttered under his breath, just for Jack to hear. Jack didn't respond. He simply watched every detail, Grace's every glance, Shirley's every cutting word. Minutes later, Grace brought the coffee pot. As she leaned to refill Sam's mug, a drop slipped onto the tablecloth. It was enough for Earl to slam his heavy hand on the counter, making the cutlery rattle. "Again, Grace. You can't even serve coffee right." The diner fell silent. Grace hurried to clean up, stammering apologies. Sam, trying to ease things, said quietly, "It's all right, miss. It's just coffee." But Shirley cut him off. "No, it's not all right. Not when it's the 100th time this useless girl messes up." The word useless hung in the air. Jack leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Earl. "That wasn't necessary," he said, his tone low but firm. Earl turned slowly, brow furrowed. "What was that?" "You didn't need to yell at her over a drop of coffee," Jack repeated, unshaken. The diner owner let out a harsh laugh. "Listen here, driver. That waitress is my employee. If you don't like how I run my restaurant, the road's right out there." Grace looked as if she might disappear. She clutched the coffee pot as if it were a shield. Her eyes pleaded in silence, "Don't do this. I'm the one who will pay." Cole leaned forward, his voice louder than usual. "That's no way to talk to anyone." Frankie placed a hand on his shoulder, asking for calm. The diner owner, Earl, walked over to their table, towering above them. "Last time I'm saying it, eat, pay, and leave. I'm the one in charge here." From behind the counter, Shirley added, "And if you don't like it, there are plenty who do. Folks like you are nothing but road noise." Cole's blood boiled. Sam breathed deeply, trying not to rise. Frankie stayed silent, serious, but his eyes said everything. Jack stood slowly. Not fast, not aggressive. Just steady. He placed some bills on the table. "Let's go," he told his companions. They got up, the air heavy as lead. Jack paused beside Grace, stopping for a moment. He looked at her and spoke in a low voice, quiet, but clear enough for Earl to hear. "We'll be back, miss." The waitress trembled. She didn't answer. But for a fleeting second, her eyes shone as if a crack of light had broken into a locked room. The truckers left. Outside, the sun scorched the gravel. The engines roared to life, not with anger, but with promise. In the parking lot, Cole kicked a rock, seething. "Can't swallow this, Jack." Sam nodded, his voice deep. "That girl's living in hell." Frankie, always to the point. "Tomorrow morning, we come back." Jack looked out at the highway, the horizon fading into dust. His expression wasn't one of explosive rage, it was one of decision. "Yes, we'll come back. And we'll find out just how far this cruelty goes." One by one, the trucks rolled out, lifting clouds into the air. Inside the diner, Grace wiped down tables with tears burning in her eyes. For the first time in a long time, someone had seen her pain. And without her knowing, someone had promised not to leave her alone. What would happen when they returned could change everything forever. If you believe no one should live in silence in the face of injustice, write the word justice in the comments. Your voice strengthens this story. The sun had barely risen when the four truckers once again parked their steel giants in the gravel lot. The rumble of their engines announced their arrival before anyone inside the diner could glance out the window. Jack Reynolds climbed down first, adjusting the cap on his brow. The others followed close behind, Sam, calm as ever, Frankie, face set in stone, and Cole, more impatient, his eyes burning with the anger still lingering from the day before. The door swung open, the bell jingled, but before they could take 2 steps inside, Earl's gruff voice boomed from the counter. "Well, look who's back. Thought the road was too long for you to waste time here." Jack drew in a deep breath, controlling the urge to snap back. "We just want breakfast. Nothing more." Earl narrowed his eyes, suspicious. Shirley, at his side, flashed a cynical smile. "Then sit down. But don't expect any special treatment." The truckers took the same table as the day before. Grace wasn't there. It was Shirley who brought the menus, slamming them down on the table harder than needed. "The waitress is busy in the kitchen. I'll take care of you myself." Cole lifted his gaze, steady. "We'd rather be served by Grace." Silence fell. Earl leaned over the counter, his hands gripping it like claws. "She's got work to do. She's not a babysitter for truckers." Jack replied calmly, but directly. "We'll wait." Minutes dragged on. The whole diner seemed to watch. At last, Shirley huffed and disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, the door swung open and Grace Miller appeared. Her eyes were lowered, her body stiff. The sleeve of her uniform was poorly rolled, and as she drew near the table, the truckers saw it. A dark bruise marked her arm, just above the elbow. Cole's eyes widened. Frankie held his breath. Sam shook his head in outrage. Jack clenched his fists on the table but kept his tone steady. "What happened, Grace?" She froze. Her eyes flicked to her sleeve, tugging at it discreetly, as if trying to hide the inevitable. Before she could open her mouth, Earl answered for her, rising from behind the counter. "She's clumsy. Always bumping into furniture. Must have slammed into the kitchen door." The silence was heavy. Jack leaned forward. "Is that true, Grace?" She hesitated. Her tear-filled eyes told another story. Her lips parted, but before any word escaped, Earl stomped across the diner. He grabbed her arm, right where the bruise was. Grace let out a whimper of pain, recoiling. That was the last straw. Jack rose in one sharp motion. "Let her go, you coward!" Earl held his gaze, tightening his grip. "Watch your mouth, driver." "Coward," Jack repeated, his deep voice echoing through the diner. "A real man doesn't scar a woman with the weight of his hand." Grace struggled to break free, tears streaming. Shirley rushed over, shoving the young woman aside and screaming, "Shut your mouth, you ungrateful brat! Look what you're causing!" Cole shot up, his chair clattering to the floor. "You're the ones causing this. Day after day, beating and humiliating her." The tension burst wide open. Customers shrank back, some whispering, others pretending not to see. Frankie stood slowly, placing himself beside Jack, solid as a wall. Sam stayed just behind, but his eyes missed nothing. Earl suddenly released Grace, shoving her against the counter. "You don't know what you're talking about. This girl owes us everything. We give her food, a bed, and you dare to complain?" Jack stepped forward. "A bed? You call that filthy little hole a bed? You call exploitation a favor?" Shirley snapped back, her face red with rage. "She'd be on the streets if it weren't for us." Grace wept silently against the wall. Her eyes found Jack's, and for the first time she saw something no one there had ever shown her, someone willing to fight for her. Her voice came weak, but audible. "It's true. I live in the back. They hit me. They humiliate me. I have nowhere else to go." The whole diner stirred. Earl lunged forward again, but this time Jack caught him by the chest, slamming him against the wall. "Enough!" he roared. "You're not laying another hand on her. Not today. Not ever." Shirley shrieked, trying to shove Jack away, but Cole stepped between them. "Don't touch him, lady. The party's over." Chaos erupted. Some customers stood, others retreated in fear. Grace sobbed, her arm aching, yet relieved she had finally spoken. Then, quietly, Frankie lifted his phone and began recording. Without Earl realizing, every word, every gesture, every accusation was being captured. Jack, still pinning the diner owner against the wall, spoke firmly. "If the law doesn't reach this place, we'll bring this filth to the law." Earl struggled to break free. "You've got no proof. It's her word against mine." Jack smirked faintly. "Proof is something we're no longer short of." The tension was a hair's breadth from exploding into blows. Jack took a deep breath, released Earl, and stepped back. "Let's go, boys," he said. "This isn't over." Before leaving, he pointed a finger at the diner owner. "Hear me well, Earl. Tomorrow, when we come back, you won't have anywhere left to hide behind these walls." The truckers walked out, customers whispering in their wake. Grace remained standing, her face streaked with tears, but with something new in her eyes, hope. For the first time in years, someone had heard her voice. Outside, the engines roared louder than ever. The road trembled under the weight of the trucks, as if announcing that this story was far from over. And inside the diner, Earl breathed heavily, his eyes burning with hatred. But beneath the rage was a fear he would never admit out loud. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Night fell over the highway like a heavy blanket. At the truck stops, neon lights blinked lazily. On the curves, only headlights cut through the darkness. Inside Jack Reynolds' truck, the silence was thicker than the hum of the engine. No music, no chatter. Only thoughts that weighed more than the cargo. In the passenger seat, Cole held the phone. Frankie's recording was there, frozen on the screen, ready to play again. Just one tap. He had already watched it at least 10 times. Grace's bruised arm, her cry of pain, Earl's arrogance, her stifled tears. Each replay burned deeper. "If this doesn't make the world angry, I don't know what will," he said, voice tight. Frankie, in the back seat, only nodded. He was a man of few words, but the resolve in his eyes spoke louder than speeches. Sam, sitting beside him, let out a long sigh. "The road has shown us plenty of ugly things, but this one's among the worst." Jack said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the dark line of asphalt, but his mind replayed the scene like an open wound. Earl's hand crushing Grace's arm. Her face twisted in pain. The town's complicit silence. "Tomorrow morning we go back," he finally said, his voice low but steady as stone. "Only this time, it won't be just for coffee." Meanwhile, back at the little diner, Grace was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes with trembling hands. Shirley and Earl argued in the next room, their voices dripping with rancor. "Did you see what those truckers did?" Shirley shouted. "They're trying to meddle where they don't belong." "Let them try," Earl growled. "I run this place. Always have. That girl is my responsibility, and if they don't like it, they can keep driving." Grace shut her eyes, swallowing tears. Responsibility. That's what they called the years of humiliation, the sleepless nights in the moldy back room, the marks she carried on her arms. But something was different that night. For the first time, someone had seen. For the first time, someone had said aloud, "You don't deserve this." She lay down on the thin mattress, her body aching, and felt something new inside her. A timid hope, almost frightening. Would those truckers really come back? Would she have the courage to accept help? The next morning, bright and early, the truckers met in the lot of a roadside stop. The video was already making the rounds among them. Frankie had sent it to a few friends, who passed it to others. Within hours, more than a dozen people had already seen it. Cole showed the phone screen to Jack. "Look at this. People are already commenting. They're outraged." Jack scanned the quick messages flashing on the screen. "Poor girl, this can't go unpunished. Report them." Sam crossed his arms. "The world today has bigger eyes than we think. This recording could be the start of something." Jack drew a deep breath. "It could. But it's not enough. She needs to get out of there. Today." The morning was clear when they pulled up again in front of the diner. The rumble of the engines made the windows shake. As they stepped inside, Earl was already waiting at the door, arms crossed, eyes of a cornered beast. "You again?" he spat. "Don't you have anywhere else to eat?" Jack answered calmly. "We do. But we choose to eat here." The air grew heavy. Shirley, hands on her hips, cast a poisonous glare. "Grace isn't available. You'll have to settle for me." Cole shot back immediately. "We want to be served by Grace." The diner filled with murmurs. Some customers looked on curiously. Others pretended not to hear. Shirley huffed, turned, and stormed into the kitchen. Minutes later, Grace emerged. Her face was pale, her arms still bruised. She carried a tray, trying to smile, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Jack pulled out a chair. "Sit with us a moment, Grace." Earl reacted instantly. "She doesn't have time for chit-chat. Get to work, girl." This time, Grace didn't move. She stood frozen, tray in her hands, looking first at Jack, then at Earl. The silence was suffocating. Jack rose to his feet. "That bruise on her arm isn't an accident. You hurt her." Earl laughed, a forced, loud laugh. "Nonsense. The girl's clumsy. Always bumping into things." Shirley chimed in. "She's always been like that. Can barely walk without tripping." Cole raised his voice, furious. "Enough with the lies. Everyone here sees how you treat her." Earl stepped forward, finger pointed. "You don't know a thing." Then Grace spoke. Her voice came weak, but steady. "They do know. It's true." Shirley's eyes widened. "Shut your mouth, you ungrateful brat." Earl grabbed her arm again, right where the bruise was. Grace screamed in pain. That was the trigger. Jack lunged forward, slamming Earl against the wall. "Enough. You're a coward," he roared. "A man who hurts a woman is nothing but filth." Shirley rushed in to interfere, shoving at Jack, but Cole held her back firmly. "Stay out of this." The diner erupted into chaos. Customers jumped to their feet, some trying to intervene, others backing away in fear. Grace wept, finally freed from Earl's grip. Frankie, calm and steady, lifted his phone. He filmed every second, his hand unwavering, his eyes cold. Jack kept Earl pinned against the wall, but he didn't raise a fist. He just stared into him, eyes hard as steel. "Listen closely. If you ever lay a hand on her again, there won't be one stone left standing in this place." Earl, red-faced, struggled to break free. "You've got no proof." Jack stepped back, controlled. "Proof?" He pointed at Frankie. "It's in his pocket." Silence spread like wildfire. Earl paled. Jack drew a slow breath, regaining composure. "Let's go, boys," he said. "But this isn't over." Cole leaned across the counter, staring Earl and Shirley down. "The road has eyes, and it never forgets." The truckers walked out. Engines roared, shaking the gravel. Inside, the diner buzzed with whispers. Grace stood still, tears running down her cheeks, but with something new in her chest: courage. For the first time, she wasn't alone. On the way back, inside the truck, Cole turned to Jack. "What now?" Jack kept his eyes fixed on the road. "Now, we take this further. The town needs to know. The police need to know. And Grace," he paused, "Grace is getting out of there, no matter what it takes." Frankie's recording glowed on the phone screen, ready to reach the world. And as the trucks rumbled down the highway, raising dust and hope, one certainty burned in their hearts: the time of oppression was over. The afternoon sun lay across the highway as the truckers returned once more to the old diner. This wasn't a coffee stop anymore. It was a rescue. Each step toward the door carried the resolve of men who knew they wouldn't leave empty-handed. Inside, the air was heavy. Earl pretended normalcy behind the counter, but the sweat on his forehead and the hardness in his eyes betrayed the fear gnawing beneath. Shirley, more bitter than ever, served a few customers as if nothing had happened. But the whispers had already spread across the room. Everyone knew something had changed since the last confrontation. As soon as the truckers walked in, Earl tried to mask it. Well, if it isn't the kings of the road. Back to stir trouble again?" Jack approached slowly, placing his heavy hands on the wooden counter. "We didn't come to stir trouble. We came to take." Earl arched an eyebrow. "Take what?" Jack didn't break eye contact. "Grace." The silence was absolute. Shirley dropped a spoon onto a tray, the metallic clatter echoing through the diner like a gunshot. "You've lost your minds," Earl scoffed with a nervous laugh. "That girl works here. She's my property." Jack straightened, his voice coming out firm, like thunder barely restrained. "People are not property. Not anymore." Grace emerged from the kitchen, her face pale, her body tense. At the sight of the truckers, her eyes filled with tears, not of fear, but of hope. She dropped the rag she had been holding and walked forward slowly, as if stepping outside an invisible prison for the very first time. "I want to go with them," she said, her voice low but clear enough for everyone to hear. Earl exploded. "You're not going anywhere, ungrateful wretch. Everything you have, you owe to me." Shirley grabbed Grace's arm, trying to yank her back. Grace whimpered but did not retreat. That was when Sam, the oldest of the truckers, stepped in. He grasped Shirley's wrist firmly, without violence, and said, "It's over." Earl stormed forward, his face red. "If you touch her, I'll call the police." Frankie, who had remained silent until then, raised his phone and held the screen up. The video played for all to see, Earl shouting, gripping Grace's arm, her crying, her confession that she was abused. Customers leaned forward, whispering. The truth was out in the open. Jack gave a half-smile, without joy. "Call the police, Earl. But remember, when they get here, they'll see this first." He pointed to the phone. "And it'll be you behind bars." The diner owner turned pale. For the first time, he had no words. The whole room was against him. Jack looked at Grace. "Get your things. It's time to leave." She hesitated for a second, eyes brimming with tears, then ran to the back room. She returned with a small, worn-out suitcase, almost empty. The living proof of her years there, a miserable space, years of humiliation reduced to a fragile bag. Cole rose and took the suitcase from her hand. "This doesn't define you anymore. The road's too wide to be trapped in a filthy room." They surrounded her like a wall. They walked through the diner in silence, but every glance from the customers said the same thing. Someone had finally done what everyone else was too afraid to. When they reached the parking lot, Grace paused for a moment in front of the trucks. The sun glinted off the chrome, and she felt something she had never felt there before: freedom. I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice breaking. Jack placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to thank us. You just need to live." The ride to the city was silent, not from fear, but from relief. Grace, sitting in the cab, the wind brushing her face through the open window, looked at the highway as though seeing the world for the first time. Every mile pulled her farther from the invisible chains that had bound her. Sam, driving beside her, spoke softly. "See that horizon? It's yours now. No one owns you anymore." Grace smiled through her tears. "It's been so long since I felt this, like I could breathe without asking permission." They arrived in the city as the sun was dipping low, painting the storefronts in gold. Jack led the convoy to a modest but well-kept diner on the corner of a busy street. The sign read, "Gallagher's Café." Inside, a middle-aged man with graying hair wiped the counter calmly. Beside him, a kind-faced woman arranged cakes in the display case. They were Tom and Mary Gallagher, known along the road for welcoming truckers whenever they passed by. At the sight of Jack, Tom opened his arms. "My friend of the road. It's been too long." Jack didn't waste time. "Tom, Mary, I need to ask you something. It's serious." Mary noticed Grace standing behind, small and withdrawn, clutching her worn suitcase. She walked over gently. "Who is this girl?" Jack answered. "She's someone who needs a new beginning." Mary softly touched Grace's hand. "Do you have a name, dear?" "Grace," she whispered. Mary smiled. "Well then, Grace. From today on, you have a place here." Tom nodded firmly. "And a job too, if you want it. Nobody here treats workers like slaves." Grace's tears flowed freely. She threw herself into Mary's arms, who held her like a mother. For the first time in years, she felt safe. Outside, the truckers watched through the window. Cole smiled. "At last, she'll have peace." Sam nodded. "And dignity." But Jack didn't smile. His gaze was serious, fixed on the highway leading back to the diner. "It's not over yet. Earl and Shirley need to pay for what they've done." Frankie raised his phone. "The video's already spreading. It's only a matter of hours before everyone knows." Jack drew in a deep breath. "Then let the truth make the noise. We've already done our part. We set her free. Now, the rest of the world will see who they really are." That night, Grace slept in a clean room, with soft sheets and a window open to the sky. It wasn't big, it wasn't luxurious, but it was free. She cried quietly before falling asleep, not from sadness, but from relief. For the first time, there was no fear waiting behind the door. And while she closed her eyes, the truckers returned to the road. Their engines roared like a promise. Earl and Shirley still believed they had power. But their power crumbled with every share of the video, with every outraged voice. The path was set, the road to freedom had begun, and nothing could stop it. The city woke up different that morning. Frankie's video had exploded across social media. The images were undeniable: the waitress being humiliated, the owner gripping her already bruised arm, the trucker stepping in, and Grace's trembling confession that she lived under exploitation and abuse. Comments multiplied. "This is horrifying. Someone needs to help this girl. That man belongs in jail." Indignation spread like wildfire. That very day, the first reporters appeared in the small town. Cameras, microphones, and sharp questions filled the streets. And along with the press came the authorities. Police stormed into the diner, sirens blaring, catching Earl and Shirley at the counter. "Earl Whitman, you are under arrest for assault and labor exploitation." The handcuffs gleamed under the morning light, and the image of him being led to the squad car was broadcast across the state. Shirley screamed, trying to argue, but she too was taken away, charged with complicity. The restaurant, once full of complicit stares and cowardly silence, now became the stage for the public downfall of two oppressors. The truth could no longer be hidden. Meanwhile, at Gallagher's cafe, Grace watched it all on the television, her trembling hands holding a cup of hot tea. Mary sat beside her, stroking her back with care. Tom, steady as always, said only, "Evil lasts only until the day courage arrives." Grace wept in silence, but now they were different tears. They weren't of pain or fear. They were of liberation. Every image of Earl being taken away was like another chain breaking inside her. The truckers kept rolling down the road, but they never failed to stop by to see her. Jack, especially, would sometimes sit quietly at the counter with a cup of coffee, just to make sure she was all right. One afternoon, Grace found him leaning against his truck, ready to leave. The sun was setting, painting the horizon orange. She approached slowly. "I don't know how to thank you." Jack smiled, that small smile of a man used to the silence of the highway. "You don't need to thank me. You did the hardest part. You had the courage to speak." She shook her head, her eyes misting. "I couldn't have done it without you." Jack looked up at the sky, as if speaking to time itself. The road teaches us that no one walks alone. There's always someone ready to carry part of the weight. Grace hugged him. At first it was timid, but then it grew strong, full of gratitude. When she pulled away, her eyes shone with a light that had never been there before. Months passed. Gallagher's cafe prospered. With Grace's arrival, the place gained new life. She worked with dedication, but now with dignity. Her posture was different. No more hunched shoulders, no more eyes that avoided contact. There was firmness. There was pride. One day, a group of truckers walked into the cafe. Among them was Jack. The sound of boots on the floor made Grace smile broadly, not the forced smile of before, but the genuine joy of someone who recognizes friends. "Look who's back!" Mary exclaimed cheerfully. Grace served the tables, but when she reached Jack, she set the cup in front of him with care. "Road coffee, as always." He looked at her, and in his eyes was the silent confirmation that it had all been worth it. "Now, yes," he said, raising the mug. "Now the coffee tastes like freedom." The men laughed, toasted, and the whole cafe seemed to warm with that moment. Later, Jack said goodbye. Grace walked him to the door. The convoy of trucks was waiting, engines purring like impatient hearts. She looked at the steel giants, then at Jack. "The road calls, doesn't it?" "It always does," he replied. "But every time I pass through here, I'll want to see you well." Grace nodded, smiling. "I will be. Because now I have a home." Jack adjusted his cap, opened the cab door, and climbed in. Before leaving, he cast one last look at her. It was a look of complicity, of promise. The engine roared, and the trucks rolled out, raising dust on the highway lit by the sunset. Grace stood at the door, watching until the last tail light disappeared around the bend. There was no sadness, only gratitude. That night, as she lay her head on the clean pillow of her new room, she thought of everything she had lived. The silence of humiliation, the fear of speaking, the dark little room behind the diner. And then, the trucker's arrival, the confrontation, the courage to tell the truth, and finally, freedom. The road had changed her life. But perhaps more than that, it had taught her that even in the most unlikely places, justice can find its voice. And Grace, now free, knew this truth. The road was no longer a prison. It was hope. If this story touched your heart, write Amen or Truth in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove courage can change destinies.